Joining us now in the studio in Jerusalem is David Rubin, author of Confronting Radicals, What America Could Learn from Israel. Shalom.
Good to be with you, Yoni.
So this is your seventh book, every book on an interesting and important and relevant topic. Why did you write this book now?
Well, it was mainly the George Floyd riots in America. And after seeing American cities burning down by people who were supposed to be peacefully protesting racism, and then seeing New York City with, and I grew up in New York, so I've been in Israel 30 years, but growing up in New York, and suddenly seeing Macy's in Herald Square boarded up, and entire blocks, entire avenues in New York City boarded up because they're afraid of the looters. And every single one of these radical left demonstrations has turned into riots and into looting, and it just didn't make sense to me that these were all protests about racism. And from researching it, I came to realize that it's not just racism that we're talking about. The racism is a front. The racism is an excuse. It's a facade for a much bigger agenda, which is an agenda of the radical left to take over America and to totally change America from what it once was.
And why are you so concerned? I mean, I remember as a kid there was looting, I think it was in Los Angeles and many different areas throughout the years. Why now, as you're saying, it comes from a bigger agenda? Why are you more concerned?
Well, usually when there was looting, and I remember a couple of cases of looting. There was a blackout in New York once, and there was looting. But here we're talking about a political agenda. Here we're talking about exploiting certain events that have been happening for a much bigger agenda. And it's become very clear, if you follow it over the decades, from the 1960s, and I have to tell you, there was some great music in the 1960s, but that was about the only thing.
That was good.
That was good, because if you follow it into the 1970s, you see that the radical left they joined the establishment, and everyone was saying, oh, they've joined the me generation. Well, they didn't join the me generation. They joined the establishment, but they remained radical leftists, and they've been pushing their agenda for several decades, and during the Obama years, it became quite pronounced.
But what is their goal? I mean, it's not the looting itself, of course.
No.
It's much bigger.
Looting is just a means. If you create anarchy in a country, then something always has to come in to take its place. Mm-hmm. History has shown us this. There is never a vacuum. When you have anarchy in the streets, when you have anarchy in a country, then something is always going to come take its place. And what is going to take its place? It's Marxism. And they call it socialism, because socialism is a much more user-friendly name. And if you look at the youth in America, you find that, according to the latest polls, the youth, the college-age youth, believe that socialism is just as good as capitalism, and that's in the United States, where the free market, is one of the things that made America great.
Maybe it's a lost case. I mean, we see that it's like almost 50% in America. We see what goes on in elections. You mentioned now the surveys. Maybe it's a lost case. Maybe that's what America wants.
It might be a lost case. I know that there are a lot of people who care about that and are concerned about that. So, and I'll tell you also, as an Israeli, okay, now I'm putting on the Israeli hat. As an Israeli, I am very concerned about the rise of the radical left in America, because radical left has come to mean anti-Israel. It's not what it once was.
Now you're saying that America should learn from Israel, the little country in the Middle East. Why do you say that? What could America learn from Israel?
Well, we have a lot to offer. We're this tiny people, but we're also the chosen people. We're also a people that has thousands of years of history, and we've made a lot of mistakes. We've also had a lot of successes. So I say learn from our successes, but also learn from our mistakes. So as far as our successes, well, we can point right away to the honoring of our heroes. Okay, and in the United States, you recall, in the past couple of years, we've had these horrible scenes of of monuments to American heroes being torn down, being vandalized, being profaned. And here it's a little bit different.
Generally speaking, when Memorial Day is a day of new sales and new movies, and in Israel it's like a sanctified day, that also represents a difference.
Absolutely. And what is the American criticism of the American heroes? Well, look at George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Well, they had slaves. Okay, but the whole world had slaves at that time. You have to view these things in context. And you also have to look at the good things that they did. Now, if we look at Israel, we've had heroes here. We've had modern heroes, Ben Gurion, Theodore Herzl, but nobody here, despite the criticisms that a lot of people make about Ben Gurion, what happened with the Yemenite immigrants, and Theodore Herzl, wanted to create a country in Uganda, and he was just avowedly secular and only wanted to escape anti-Semitism. But you don't see people tearing down the monuments at Mount Herzl, and you don't see people writing horrible vandalism, horrible graffiti, vandalizing Ben Gurion International Airport. And King David, King Solomon, our biblical heroes, we speak about their mistakes openly in the Torah, in the Bible, but you will never see people vandalizing the King David Hotel or King David Street, tearing down the street signs.
So what would be the primary lesson that Israel?
So the lesson is honor your heritage and honor your heroes, because if you don't honor your heritage, a country's heritage is the foundations on which it's built. It's what we teach our children about the lessons, the positive lessons, and even lessons from the mistakes that our heroes have made through history. And if you tear that down, you're tearing down the country's foundations.
Now, your title is Confronting Radicals. You mentioned the radicals in the protests, but how about the current administration? Do you feel that there are radical elements in the Democratic Party, in the current administration?
Sadly, the far left has been coming to dominate the Democratic Party. Hasn't always been that way. It's been a process that started with Jimmy Carter. It continued in the Obama administration, and it became more pronounced in the Obama administration because Obama's background was basically Muslim as a child and affinity with the Muslim world, with the radical Muslim world, and also with the hard left in America, growing up as, growing into adulthood as a radical activist in Chicago. So that influenced the Obama administration, and Biden administration is basically Obama Part 2. Joe Biden, he has his cognitive issues. He doesn't seem to be in control. But there are a lot of Obama people in the Biden administration who are pulling the strings.
So although we'd like to be optimistic, what's next if America does not confront these radicals?
Well, I look at how the United States became so controlled by the radical left, how the school system became so secularized that you can't even say the word God in a public school, how the universities are dominated by 90% by Democratic, with the big D, professors. And I see how that change happened. That change happened because of very serious work at the grassroots. And at the grassroots and at the corporate level. It's not an accident that people are being banned, right-leaning people on Twitter and Facebook, and pro-Israel people on Twitter and Facebook are being banned. It's because those corporations have come to be controlled by the far left.
So when you explain how much power they have, it's kind of hard to think, or maybe despairing thinking, how you can confront. How could you confront?
No change is irreversible. Okay, we here in Israel had our big mistake of the Oslo peace process. We've learned from that mistake, I believe. Majority of the country leans to the right and is totally against giving away of land for peace process. Our country is against it. Change can happen. No change is irreversible. And what the left learned about working at the grassroots to change the United States can also be reversed. And I call on conservatives in the United States, those who are connected to the roots of the United States, which after all are based on the Hebrew Bible, the Judeo-Christian heritage, as they call it. And so I call on them to do the hard work at the grassroots, the quiet work at the grassroots, to make that change. And it takes a long time. It takes a few decades.
Now, in your new book, you delve into these topics. Tell us a bit more about what's in your book.
Well, I cover a lot of areas. There, the area of education, because education is where change happens for the long term. Any stable long-term change doesn't happen from the top down. It happens from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. So I discussed education. I discussed the media. I delved into the semantic problem, the problem of semantics, which we in Israel know about, exploiting the word Palestine, which after all comes from the Romans, the Roman conquerors who exiled the Jews from the land, and they understood that you change the name of the country, wipe out the name of Israel and Judea from the map, and they will have actual change. The West Bank, West Bank is a fictional term. It's not a historical term. The correct term is Judea and Samaria. In America too, there's a lot of this semantic politics going on. Mm-hmm. Just recently, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi approved a change whereby the words mother and father would not be allowed to be used in Congress. Everything has to be gender neutral, and you can't even say he or she anymore, because the radicals, the gender-confused radicals, are trying to change that agenda as well. So yes, there's a lot of change that needs to happen, and it's a long process.
So it's a long process, and there's much more to learn, and we can find that in your book. Where can our viewers get a copy of your book?
Well, it's already up on Amazon, so they can go in there, and they can get the book from there, and it will also be available for Israelis at a couple of stores in Jerusalem.
Great. Okay. So David Rubin, author of Confronting Radicals, What America Could Learn from Israel. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.